Welcome to Talking Heads on USA Global TV, starring the one and only wonderful Dr. Jacqueline. It's a prestigious place where world-class influencers and experts meet, and where you'll find the most trusted advisors and coaches for all things in life and business. Visit usaglobaltv.com to sign up for our newsletter, get the value you need, and be first in line to learn about events and giveaways and other valuable content. Connect with us. Email Dr. Jacqueline at usaglobaltv.com to talk about how you can become part of USA Global TV. That's USA Global TV, where the doctor is always in.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to USA Global TV and Radio. And my name is Jenetta Barry, and I'm part of the Talking Heads series of shows. I'm also a co-host on USA Global TV and Radio, as well as a panelist. And today, I have my Talking Heads hat on, as I'm an expert presenter on today's topic. I'm very expert on it, actually, which is we're going to be talking about the meaning of life, birth, life, and death, and all the connotations attached to that. So let's begin. So there's an interesting thing that I've noticed over the years, that especially all of us in the Western world avoid death at all costs. And I've noticed that it's very attached to the Hippocratic oath that the medical fraternity pledged to take to make sure that every life matters, because every life does matter. So it's a really precious and important oath to take. The problem is that it's kind of gone to a point where for a doctor, it's really important to save absolutely or surgeon or specialist or nurse or whoever it is, to save every single life that crosses their paths and who they've been delegated to look after and trusted to look after. Also very natural and normal. But what's happened with it is that it started to skew that nobody should die, that we should keep people alive at all costs for as long as possible, to the point of when it's appropriate for them to die. And that makes sense, but think about it this way. 50 years ago, we were told that if we reach 60 or even 70, that everybody accepted in those days, they were saying it was their time. They're old. It was time for them to leave. But now more and more people are reaching 100 and more now even. And we're saying that passing at 60 or 70 in this stage in age is tragic, that they've left the planet too early. So does that mean because we've changed the goalposts and the goalposts have been changed, that we should go back to 50 years ago and say those people died too young? And it's a really interesting thing. And, an example of where we've taken that Hippocratic oath to its extreme is in old age. An example is my mother. My mother was 93 when she got really severe pneumonia, very severe. And we were called from all corners of the earth to her bedside, rather like the royal family was called last week to the Queen's bedside. And my son Neil had to get unbelievable trains, planes, and automobiles to get there. And somebody there decided to put her into intensive care and revive her. And she revived to the point that we all gathered around her intensive care bed, and she looked at all of us and said, "I'm either very ill or dying, which is it?" And we said, well, it's supposed to be both, but you're here and you're recovering, which was lovely. We were all going, oh, wow, got mum around. I love my mum dearly. The thought of losing her had always filled me with fear, which I'm going to address just now. But the problem with that was it was a very, very severe form of illness. And if you look at history, nature provides a severe illness like that so that an elderly person can pass on more swiftly than dying slowly. And she survived it. But what nobody knew was that that severe pneumonia had gone into a cyst in her spine. And she kept on talking for the weeks afterwards how much pain she was in her back. And eventually it got so bad that they rehospitalized her. Not even pethidine or morphine was removing the pain. And it was the weekend, and she started saying she lost feeling in her feet. Then it was her lower legs. Then it was all her legs. And nobody was doing anything about it because, after all, she's 93. And by the time they woke up and did a scan, they realized that this cyst was just about to burst, and the agony of that death would have been awful. And so they removed it, but she was paralyzed from under her arms down for the next 3 to 4 years of her life. She lost her dignity and eventually her marbles too, because she already had early signs of dementia. And this is what I talk about a lot, is that there's a time and place to leave the planet, and Mother Nature has some wonderful ways of letting us go gracefully and swiftly, and that way was curtailed when the Hippocratic Oath was brought in. So that's an example of many I can give you. And in fact, somebody said to me this week, and it resonated with me so much, is we almost look at death as a form of failure. Certainly the medical fraternity feel they failed if that person's died, even if they are 96. And, it's really, they're saying, if they had died at the age that we perceive they should, it's okay. But if they don't, then it's a failure. It's a failure of those who didn't save them, and it's the failure of the person not being able to live for longer. And it made so much sense to me. And so, in a sense, there's a stigma about dying. And several years ago, the Epiphany Process included a theatrical stage presentation on depression, suicide, and their solutions. And to enable one to look at birth, life, and death from a new or even an adjusted perspective, we placed these words from my personal writings into a really thought-provoking dance piece. And it goes like this. Death is a vital part of the cycle of life. It's the natural completion of being in one form into the birthing of being into new forms. At conception, the egg and the sperm die in their individual forms to unite and construct into a new combined version of themselves. And death and rebirth is a continuing, never-ending spiral, an infinite continuum of destruction and construction as our cells die and reform. We're constantly dying and rebirthing ourselves on physical, mental, and emotional levels of our being. And within the joyful and beautiful experience of birth comes an equal amount of tension, stress, and pain. Look at the pain of giving birth to a child. And they are the natural union. The joy and the pain are the natural union for all creativity. Everything that's created comes from tension and stress and joy and release. Joy and pain are as one in the cycle of birth and death. And there is a distorted fear about death, that it's something that should be avoided at all costs, that there's a prescribed age or time to die, and only then is it permissible. And yet, death is the most certain thing in our life. It's the only thing that's guaranteed. So, an example of when we avoid death in one form, it starts happening in other forms because death is omnipresent. And COVID is another classic example of that. It's inevitable. It's going to happen. So if you avoid death in one form, it's going to show itself up in other forms in the continuum and the cycle of balance. And so if you avoid it in one form, it occurs in, well, let's take COVID. Everybody was in deep fear of dying. And so what nobody was able, because they were so consumed with that fear of dying from COVID, very valid and valuable, by the way. I'm not saying anybody should have gone around saying, oh, no, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. It did matter. And it was a big thing to bring into manageability. But in my perception and in all the work I've done over the years, I saw a lot of knee-jerk reactions to avoid COVID death. And if you avoid it, then what happens is you haven't factored in where there was death of ambition as people were shut down, death of relationships, where people were dying in a different way because of the COVID, but not directly from COVID. So the stress of trying to avoid COVID caused numerous strokes and heart attacks. People weren't able to be seen for cancer because everybody was knee-jerking on the COVID side of life and making COVID the high priority, that even now the fallout of people of dying from cancer because they weren't able to be seen to during COVID time has brought the numbers of deaths up again. They've just died in a different form for a different reason. And you can see it again, a death of earning money, a death of peace. A sense of peace went out the window whilst we were all ultra scared of dying from COVID. So again, it's not about saying, well, let's pretend COVID wasn't there and it was okay and just act normally. It was about putting in measures. But I do believe a lot of the time, a lot of countries went into such fear that they're able to reason, their reasonableness was impacted and compromised. So there was a lot of overreaction, which caused a lot of fallout in other forms and a lot of death. So how does one start to balance out the fear of death? Well, again, as I mentioned at the beginning of this presentation, perhaps I'm one that's fairly qualified to talk about balancing out that fear, because I think as a parent, one of our greatest fears is that we lose a child before we leave this planet. It's a big fear of most parents. And it's an interesting one, because I hear a lot of people saying no parent should bury their child. And this last couple of weeks of cycling through a game park reminded me again that no animal created by the divine, by, I call it the grand orderly design by God, no wild animal goes around saying my cubs or my calves or my whatever should never die before me. They know that the cycle of life happens at any time in the cycle of that being's life, be it short, medium, or long. Every single animal knows that the chance of dying tomorrow is always there. They're vigilant, they're aware of it, but they go into a certain amount of grieving if they've lost a child, and then they understand in an unconscious level as a wild animal that it's time to move on, even though that loss is always there. And somewhere along as human beings, we've gone into this mantra that we should never lose a child before we leave. And one of the things that in using this process, and I'm going to give you a soupçon of it today before we finish, has helped me to understand the bigger picture of having lost a child. And as much as, and please don't get me wrong, as much as that loss of that child is there with me for the rest of my life, several months, well, not even several, 2 months ago, I went through severe PTSD through that loss, severe, and I had to work it. Thank God I have this process to work it through. Losing a child is a lifetime process. So I'm not marginalizing that at all. My list of that loss is very, very long, very true, and very certain. But what I've been able to do is do an equal lengthy list of the benefits of having lost a child. And you go, how do you do that? Well, there are certain questions, and I'm going to give you the essence of those questions, and you might like to try them today. But I do know that if you've got the fear of losing someone or the fear that you might lose your life, these are grand questions to work through with somebody, because they're pretty big charges to deal with on your own. But I'm going to share with you the essence of how to start. And for those of you who want to work it through, give it a go. And if you find that there's still quite a lot of charge there for you, please do feel free to reach out to me, and I will help you get through that charge, because I have no fear of dying. None. And I used to. And I have no fear of losing somebody. And I used to. It doesn't mean that when it happens, I won't be filled with anguish, and I won't miss them, and I won't go through grieving. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that when it happens, I will have it in a place of open-hearted understanding and balanced manageability, so that I can get through the tough grieving and the tough loss. And when it comes to my time to leave this planet, I'm able to handle it with grace and understanding and less angst, less anxiety. I'll be in a place of deeper understanding. And that is what I'm inviting you to experience with me today. So please do, if these questions are helpful but not complete for you. So, who is it or what is it that you're scared of losing? So you go, so you decide who it is. And I would say for now, rather than working on yourself, start off first with something outside yourself, because to do it on yourself is just that little bit more difficult. So who is it that you might be concerned, scared, even petrified of losing? And then the next step is to ask, what quality or experience are you specifically scared of losing with their passing? So it could be the experience of their unconditional love, or the experience of their being able to be at ease in challenge, or their ability to keep the family together. There could be a list, and you choose the top one out of that list, if there is a list. And then you go, okay, there's no doubt in that list of loss, you're going to lose that experience or quality from them. And it's a loss, and it's a form of grieving, and it needs to be acknowledged. Then, having acknowledged that it is a loss and a grief, you go, okay, in their no longer being around and expressing that quality and giving you that experience of them expressing that quality, who's able to give it to you now that wouldn't give you that experience if the first person was still around? And I noticed, by way of example, when my mother died, it was amazing. As she was dying, my very, very good friend Moira was with me. And I suddenly watched Moira saying words and taking actions and delivering those words just like my mother would. And I went, this is my mother. This is because energy can't be created or destroyed. It reforms into new versions of itself. So if my mother had stayed, I would have missed that experience of having the mother energy through one of my very closest friends. And that has drawn us together on a level that cannot be expressed. My friendship with that special lady will go on into eternity. I know this. We have conversations now that were missing before my mother left. And still to this day, sometimes when we're discussing things, she'll say something or take an action. I'd say, my mother used to say or do that. She'd go, really? So my mother still lives on in Moira, and I would be missing that experience if my mum was still alive. And I wouldn't want to not have that experience because it is so precious. Then, so you're going to start going, where is that quality or experience being shown in other places and in other forms? Because there's no death. It's just a reformation. And here's another question. In not experiencing this quality or experience with the person you love, what would it push you to do that in still having them around you is either preventing you from doing or not motivating you from doing? So definitely after Jenny, my daughter, died, it motivated me to step into an authentic truth. It motivated me to study like never before and become more and more authentic. And it motivated me to finally find my life purpose in my late 40s. And if Jenny was still around, I can tell you now, from the history we had walked with her, we would have been, as a family, treading on eggshells, spending our whole time trying to keep her alive. And that experience would have been lost if she was still with us. I'm not saying there aren't losses. If she was still with us, she would have been around for weddings and grandchildren, nieces, nephews, her wonderful sense of humor. There's a whole load of stuff that we're missing out on. But here's the gain in not having her. So in that person, in not experiencing the quality or the experience from the person you're used to, what would it push you or what would it enable you to experience that is impossible because they're still around? Who will it enable you to turn to and draw closer to? I've explained Moira, but actually far more than that happened. And that's a long story, but so much has happened because I've lost my mum that if she was still around, I wouldn't be able to experience. And the next question, what are you unable to achieve or appreciate with their being in your life? So it could be conversations with people who you're not able to meet up with because they're there, or who do you not need to meet up with because they're there? Who are you speaking to differently? Or who would you speak to differently because you didn't have that person to speak to? And so to encapsulate what I've asked all there, the last question to just check in case more things come in. What skills, techniques, experience, and exposure will the loss of that person provide you that's missing because they're still with you? So you would go into different areas. What would it push you to do in terms of faith and trust in yourself and others and the universe at large? What would it push you to do physically? For me, it got me back into my ballet. And I hadn't done it for years. So it pushed me to physically do that. Socially, definitely, it got me to realize who I really wanted as friends. I wanted authentic, upright people who speak their truth from their heart, not hurtfully. And I am surrounded by people like that, especially here on this platform of USA Global TV, but even outside of this platform. That's because of my loss. It's helped me to form new friendships that are more authentic. It's definitely started new conversations with my family. In a couple of hours' time, I've got my son Neil coming onto the platform in Global Adventures. He and I have conversations that would be missing if Jenny was still around. I'm so thankful for those conversations. Then in terms of finances, my whole outlook to life is wholly and entirely different to what it used to be because of my loss. And I'm so grateful for that too. Definitely my work is where it is today because of my loss and losses. When you can start making that equal long list, suddenly it brings in whether that person stays or whether that person leaves, either way has equal amount of gain and loss, so that there's a sense of acceptance and appreciation, grace and unconditional love in that happening. So those are the first baby steps. Please do feel free to reach out to me. I want to thank you for your attention and your interest today. I also want to say to you, if you haven't yet subscribed to this amazing channel, subscribe to this YouTube channel now, which is USA Global TV, and you can find all of our Talking Heads episodes there under the playlist titled Talking Heads 2022. And again, please do reach out to me if I may be of service for you. And until I see you again this time next week, where I will be talking about synergizing our bodies, our health, and our emotions so that we can use our ill health to balance ourselves out. I look forward to speaking and being with you then, as I send you lots of love.